I'm going to do a part 2 tonight on the HitBox Tig 200A TIG welder. I'm just going to explain the settings that I use, what some of the different features on here mean, and I'll show you how I attempt to TIG weld. I am by no means an expert. I don't really know what I'm doing with the TIG welding, but I can make some average looking welds with it. In comparison to my welding with a MIG welder, there's no comparison, but I'm making progress slowly but surely. So I'll go over some of the things that I've learned, and we'll do a little bit of welding. So to start out with, I'll go over a couple of the little features here on the front and some stuff here on the torch, and we'll just get into it. Alright, if you've watched part 1, I've already went over everything on here, what everything is. But I didn't explain these two switches here very well. Of course, we got our on and off. It's got a really, I didn't comment on this in the first video, but it's got a really nice dust boot around this switch. I don't know, I just really like it. But anyways, so the second switch here is flip it up for your TIG, flip it down for stick welding. I think I might have said that in the first video. It's really all there is to it. We're going to be TIG welding, so we're going to have it in the TIG mode position, flipped up. The second one is the one I want to talk about for a minute. This is the 2T and 4T switch. Flipped up is 2T, flipped down is 4T. And I was a little confused about the 2T, 4T whenever I bought this unit. And I was also confused about how the arc starts on this unit whenever I bought this unit. I was under the impression that it was a lift start, and reading some comments and answers on Amazon about this switch right here, or how to start the arc on this, made me even more confused. So just right off the bat, this is not a scratch start or a lift start or anything like that. This is a high frequency start. Your tungsten never touches the metal when you're welding with this. You push the button on the torch, you hear a buzz coming out of the welder, and then your arc starts. You don't have to touch the metal and lift up. You don't have to scratch it like it's a stick welder, none of that. In 2T, you push the button once and hold it, and you start welding. When you're done, you let go of the button. You flip it over into 4T, you push the button once and let go, and it's going to continue welding until you push that button and let go again. Now, I read an answer on Amazon on this unit in the reviews. The question was, what does 2T and 4T mean? Somebody answered, scratch start. But it has nothing to do with scratch start, it has nothing to do with lift start. This unit is high frequency start. You don't touch the tungsten to the metal. I want to make that clear. 2T, 4T has nothing to do with scratch start or lift start, pertaining to this unit anyways. And from what I can find on other stuff, I've got another welder that's the same way, and my plasma cutter is the same way too. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to push the button on the torch, and we're going to see if you can hear the buzzing that comes from inside the welder for the high frequency start. And yes, I am using my several $100 DeWalt table saw as a welding cart because, well, that's for another video to make that welding cart. But alright, here we go. Alright, you hear that buzzing in there? That is the high frequency start. So when I first started learning to TIG, I didn't even use any filler rod. I was just doing what's called fusion welding, which is what I'm going to do right now. Just run it with no filler rod. You'd be melting the base material from both work pieces and fusing it into one. The downside to that is that whenever you're doing that, you're not adding filler material, you're taking it away from each piece of the base metal, and so that makes it thinner, it's weaker. So keep that in mind if you're going to do that. Now, it's perfect for different applications. There's a time and a place for that, and it's really good for learning just torch control, keeping the tip at the right height, that kind of stuff. So that's what I'm going to start with, just doing a pass or two like that. And right now I've got it set at 70 amps, and that's what we're going to use. Before I bring the camera over here, I'm going to do a little something real quick, and I'm going to dip the tungsten, purposefully dip the tungsten into the weld puddle, and I'm going to let it get real nasty and balled up. And what's going to happen is right now my tungsten's really nice and sharp. So what's going to happen, and you can probably see that my arc was very stable and very consistent. So what's going to happen whenever I dip that tungsten into the weld puddle and touch it with my electrode, or touch it with my filler rod, what's going to happen is my tungsten's no longer going to be nice and sharp, and the arc is no longer going to be consistent and straightforward. The arc's going to want to start wandering around. It's going to hop off to the side, and my tungsten's going to get balled up, and the weld's just going to turn to crap. So before I contaminate the tungsten, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start out nice and low with a good big puddle, get some swirls going in it. And I'm going to lift the tungsten up real high. You'll see the arc starting to wander and pitter out a little bit here and there, and not keep a straight consistent line with that either. And then I'll move on down a little bit, and then I will dip the tungsten. In the process, what you're also going to see is, instead of the tip of the filler rod melting into the puddle, it's going to ball up and ball up on the tungsten, or I'm sorry, ball up on the filler rod, the end of it, and it will also tend to break off in chunks, potentially. We'll see. Let's do that. See how it's no longer a tight arc? It's a big flood coming out. When I get back in there, it's nice and tight. There you go. See that arc wandering all over the place? Yeah, that arc's wandering all over now. I'll try to keep welding with it. So now you see the filler rod just balling up because I'm too far away from it. Alright, we'll start off right here. This is my fusion weld. Without the weld without filler rod. So it's super flat that you almost can't even see it. With the naked eye you can see it just fine. With the camera not so much. But super flat, it's not sticking up at all. Yeah, works and looks pretty decent. Okay. Next was my first weld. This was at 70 amps using filler rod. You can see that it's sticking up quite a bit. It's got quite a bit of height to it. Quite a bit of undercutting right here. A little bit of undercutting right here. It starts flowing out a little bit more right here, and that's because I was slowing down a little bit more. I was putting a little bit more swirl in the torch tip. And the metal was substantially hotter at that point than it was back here. You see where the metal was still cold, and I wasn't moving the tip back and forth like this at all. That really piled up here. It looks like a roly-poly sitting on it right there. A lot of undercutting on both sides, so that's no good. Alright, so this weld here, quite a bit better looking. Still by no stretch of the imaginations is it great, but yeah, it's about the best that I can do with the TIG for right now. I had bumped the heat up from 70 amps to 100 amps. I slowed down a little bit. I was putting a little bit of a swirl in it as I was going. I was getting a nice big puddle, taking the time, letting a lot of heat build up in there, and from here to here, I got some really good, consistent bead. And the first half wasn't too bad either. It kind of messed up there in the middle a little bit. Alright, and the final weld, this is where I started out real close. I intentionally lifted it up really high. You can see my puddle is not consistent through here at all. The arc was wandering back and forth. Brought it back down and dipped the tungsten several times, multiple times all throughout here. And you can see what happened is the arc started wandering, going over here, going way out over here, getting narrow. My height wasn't right, so instead of a tight arc and heat directed down onto the metal, it was like a big flood coming out. So instead of a nice straight weld like this, you get a lot of wandering from the arc. Puddles going all over the place. You have no puddle control, and it's just like that all the way down. So that's no bueno. That's what we got. I'm planning on building, well, I've got several things coming up really soon that I'm going to be doing a lot of welding on. One of them is my project car. I've got a Grand Marquis that I'm building into a lowrider, doing full suspension and everything on it. So I'm going to be modifying some control arms on the front, doing some brackets and stuff on the back of it. So I'm going to be doing a lot of plasma cutting and welding on that here really soon. I'm going to have to build a battery rack for the trunk, some compressor brackets, mounts, stuff like that. So we're probably going to see a lot more of the TIG and that stuff. Any of those welds that will be on hardware that will be seen, I'll probably be using the TIG. Any of it that's just pure structural up underneath the car, nothing else, nothing fancy, I'm going to be doing all that with a MIG because I'm going to be up under the car welding on it. Now the plan is to buy some brand new lower control arms for it, bring those inside, cut them apart with the plasma cutter, weld it all back up how I needed them welded up. So, but I'm probably still going to be using the MIG on that stuff because it's going to be a lot of welding. And while the TIG's really slow, it can create nice welds. For me, it's too slow, and I'm not as proficient with it as I am with the MIG, so I'll be doing a lot of MIG welding on that project, but I do have some other stuff that I'll be using the TIG on some more. I am still learning on it though, so I mean I'm hesitant on doing a lot of welding videos with the TIG because I am learning. I don't want to show you guys all my bad habits on it and then have you pick up on those. I don't really have anything else. It was just meant to be a quick video doing a couple little passes and my settings on the welder. The one thing that I didn't cover was my shielding gas flow rate, and that is, I have it set at 10 liters per minute in the flow meter. I don't really have a good reason why I use that one. It just saw some people online use that, figured that's where I get a starting point at, and I just never changed it. But all right, I hope you guys enjoyed.